This is an accelerated tutorial on the newly released seller counteroffer and seller multiple counteroffer. And the seller counteroffer is the same as the buyer counteroffer. But this is what's used when the seller wants to counter a purchase agreement. Okay, and I'll show you what changed. But it's really simple. So I'll go through it quickly, okay? We put in the number 1. Now, only if the seller is countering a second time, meaning the seller counters, the buyer counters, and the seller has to counter again, that's when you put a number 2. But if a seller is countering a purchase agreement, it should always be number 1. You put the date you draft it, the date of the offer you're countering, and then this is simple, right? Property address, name of the buyer and seller. Okay. Now, this here, I could do a whole video ranting about this. In my opinion, just a little side commentary, this could all be fixed if the source documents, namely the RPA, were altered. And this to me is just pollution, okay? This is just pollution. This could all be fixed, okay? So ignore it because it doesn't really have much bearing, okay? So ignore it. We come down here to the actual point of a counteroffer, which is to write in the terms that we're countering. All we're doing is mentioning what's not agreeable in the preceding document, which is the purchase agreement, okay? And so we're going to change the sales price and the close of escrow to be 60 days after acceptance. I like to itemize and do 1, 2, and then just put numerals just so it's simple to see that each line item is separated by the number. And that's it. And sometimes I see agents write all of the terms to say the same. Well, yeah, I mean, that's default, right? I mean, that's implied. You don't need to write it on here. You don't need to restate terms that are already agreeable. You're only putting what you want the changes to be. Everything else from the purchase agreement or the preceding documents like counters, that all conveys, that stays the same. You're only putting what you want to change. Do you need to incorporate one of these forms? Read through it. Do you need to incorporate it? And if you do, check the box and incorporate it. If you do nothing here, you're done. The seller signs and it expires the 3rd day after acceptance. If you want to change that time frame, put it here. If you want to shorten or lengthen it. That's it, okay? Now, the buyer can either accept it or the buyer can check this box and then do a BCO, a buyer counteroffer. If the buyer checks this box and does a BCO, they still have to sign this. This still has to be signed. If they're countering or accepting, they must sign this. If they're rejecting, there's nothing that they need to do. Now, a big change is this late acceptance. There's some other little word changes in here too, but with the late acceptance, so many times these expire, right? Someone puts, maybe it expires in 24 hours, expires, but then the buyer signs and everyone goes to escrow. That happens all the time, just telling you. Now, this is kind of cleaning it up. Whereas in the past, people have just gone forward, proceeded with expired forms, and no one cares because everyone's in agreement about proceeding. Now they have it more official where the seller has to countersign. Whoever made the original counter, since it did expire. I mean, the form is no longer. The form has expired. Well, just to protect the person that made the original form, they have to countersign, meaning sign a second time, which is good. I mean, this is fine. This can go away, but this actually makes way more sense. All right, so that's it. If this form has expired, then there's a late acceptance, second signature required. Okay, and the BCO looks the same. It's just the BCO, buyer counteroffer, is used to counter a seller counteroffer. Let's go down and look at the multiple counteroffer. What happens when the seller gets multiple offers and wants to counter multiple buyers? Well, same thing as before. It's the same form, right? You write in whatever terms. Now, here's another mistake that's made. Sometimes, let's say there's 3 buyers. It's in 3 SMCOs. Each buyer gets their own counter. Now, you don't write 1, 2, 3. No, it's all counteroffer number 1. The number is the round. Are you in round 1 of the match? Are you in round 2 of the match? It's the round number you're in. You're not doing counteroffer number 1 goes to buyer number 1. No, it doesn't work that way. And then counteroffer 2 goes to buyer number 2. No. It's all number 1 to all buyers. Okay? And you put this in, fill it out just like we talked about. But now here's the difference, okay? The party making the counter has to countersign, meaning sign a second time. Because what if all three buyers all agreed? Wouldn't the seller be committed three ways? No. The seller must sign again. So that's why after the buyer agrees, now of course the buyer can check this box and counter again or just agree. After the buyer agrees, the seller has to sign again. And then that is what executes, or as they say in Northern California, ratifies the document, okay? And they have this other section, just because they love adding every variable known to man in every form in the C.A.R library, about backup position. I mean, use it if you want. I personally wouldn't, but whatever. It's there. Use it if you see it fit. Now, they also have the late acceptance. So not only does the seller have to sign this counter twice, because if all the buyers sign it, great, doesn't matter. You must have the seller sign a second time. But we also have to bring over that whole late acceptance thing we talked about. What if the seller signs after the form expired? Well, now the buyer has to sign for a second time. So this gives that buyer the late acceptance ability to sign for a second time. But without that, provided that everything is being done before expiration, you just need 2 seller signatures and 1 buyer signature on a seller multiple counteroffer. And those are the counteroffers. That's it. Hope you found it helpful. Thank you for watching.